Hi, welcome to our podcast, Project Brightside, where we always look on the bright side, even when things are looking pretty dark. My name's Dr. Shelby, and I'm your host.
Topics of discussion for our podcast include anything that falls under the categories of society and culture, education, and TV and film. The first 8 episodes of our podcast will be the Meet the Owners edition. Each episode will have an interview followed by a Bright Talk segment. The goal of our Bright Talk segment is to bring light to complex topics or problems and help listeners become better informed. We're super excited for this new adventure. Thank you for tuning in.
For today's podcast, I'll be interviewing our co-host for the podcast, Richard Brito. Hi, Richard. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing really well. How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm really happy to have you on with us today.
Me too. I'm super excited. This has been a long time coming, and I'm really, really happy that we are finally at a place that we're launching our podcast.
Yeah, definitely echo that sentiment. With that, why don't we go ahead and get started? So I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you was just, who are you? Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Richard Brito. I was born in Hialeah, Florida. I was the first in my family to graduate from high school. I graduated from Miami Springs Senior High School in 2016. I then went on to FSU through the CARE program, which is a program for first generation students. And I got my bachelor's of science there in psychology with a minor in public administration in 2020. And then I continued my master's at FSU and got a clinical social work master's under the guidance of Karen Omi and Dr. Fleischer through GHCP at FSU Com. I started off first as social leadership concentration, but then I realized that I wanted to pursue a clinical concentration. So I kind of had a best of both worlds and tried, the social leadership aspect, and then like right before I was about to finish, I switched over to clinical and did that. Now I am a year 2 doctorate of public health at FAMU, focus on behavioral sciences and health education, and I'm under the guidance of Dr. Ortiz, and I'm trying to finish in 2025, but if it happens in 2026, that's good too. So Richard Brito, myself, I love collaborating. I definitely like creating in my free time. I definitely always love watching TV and movies, playing with my dogs. When I watch TV, and it definitely inspires me to, make my own. And that's what sort of drove the Brightside Productions to want to be in that creative world. So yeah, that's basically who Richard is in terms of like the microcosm of like people surrounding me. My partner, I live with, Luke Riosti. We started the company together with my awesome friends. I met him in my senior year of undergrad, and we fell in love, and the pandemic happened. So then we just like decided to build something, and then the Brightside Production started around that time. So yeah, that's who Richard Brito is now and who I aspire to be. I do want, after my doctorate, I aspire to teach at a university and do my residency for licensure so that I could be a clinician. So it's like 2 more years after my master's, but I went on to my doctorate, so I had to like postpone that. Once I finish, I'll be a licensed clinical social work, hopefully, which is like the equivalent of a clinical psychologist, which has been a dream of mine. And I aspire to apply all I learn into this company. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that with us, Richard. You've certainly been busy.
Yeah.
Like 80 degrees.
I'm definitely stopping, hopefully. I like that. The mindset right now is to stop.
Yeah, you deserve some rest, but that's amazing. Definitely a feat. So I guess the next question that I have for you is a little bit more difficult. And it's, what are 3 to 7 core values that you really think describe who you are as a person?
That's a good question. Let's see. So definitely resilience. I grew up definitely the most throughout my undergrad experience. Um, Reality definitely kicked in, and I had to definitely embody that word, especially with Karen Omi. She created the Resilience Project,
Mm,
and I sort of went on to piggyback off of that and create the student ambassador program that advocates for that project. So definitely that perseverance. So reminding yourself to keep going, to get back to that state that you were once. Get going back to resilience. Strength takes a
mm,
lot of strength to do that, and then it also sort of relates to endurance. Um, but with all of that, you also want to like keep in mind compassion,
mhm.
um, and honesty, as well as empathy. I guess those are like the a good core values of who Richard Brito is.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that again. I think it's awesome that you're able to, identify all of those. And I definitely agree, knowing you in real life as well.
Thank you.
So, the next thing, which you touched on a little bit already, but just to kind of elaborate, is what do you aspire to do in life kind of down the line?
Yeah, that I always think in the 5-year mindset, to sort of like have an idea but not really stick too much to it. Because you can't really plan the future. You could only like have an idea of what
Sure.
could happen to a certain extent, unless you're doing like clinical trials. But um so I definitely want to push further the Brightside Productions. Right now we're an LLC, a limited liability company. So eventually I want to build a nonprofit clinic under it, to provide mental health services where we conduct research to improve society. I also want to teach, write. I'm definitely gonna want to write a lot of books. Eventually get into real like live acting. I want to get an EGOT one day, so like Emmy, Grammy, Oscars, Tony. So I need to like really dive in to the singing, dancing, and more.
That's cool. That's awesome. Definitely feel like you have a good vision for yourself. And like you said, everything kind of fluctuates in time. So I don't think, anyone necessarily needs a specific plan outside of, those overarching goals that you shared.
Yeah, especially like since I've been alternating so much like between different projects, I feel
Hmm.
like once I accomplish like what I've aspired to accomplish in terms of like the degrees and the
Yeah,
education and all that stuff, I get to like dive even more so into passion projects that are just like solely related to the Brightside Productions and the people that I want to surround myself with. Like, so it's very nice to look forward to being outside of the school system for sure.
yeah. Well, you're almost there.
Yeah, yeah, 2 more years, hopefully. All right, that's the plan.
So, the next one, you've already talked about how you're, a leader, or at least alluded to that in a number of ways. But, just to kind of discuss it further, what does your leadership experience consist of?
Yes, so I am currently the CEO and co-founder of the Brightside Productions LLC, which is a multidisciplinary production company that applies evidence-based research into its projects. I also co-created the animated show called The Regents, Opticon Awakens, which we have on YouTube, and launched the Regions Opticon Awakens cast on all music platforms. So it's really nice that we get to have all the different cast members input into these projects. We just released our first album, Volume One, The Convocation, for the Regents, and we then released the deluxe version. So I really like the music releasing aspect of it, of from the record label that we have. I guess other leadership things, regarding the co-creating the animated mature audience show called Morally Gray, which we are launching on YouTube,
Mhm.
and Morally Gray cast on all music platforms. So I just love like when connecting with the cast members and bringing the music to life, with the lyrics, and then working with Jake with the music. So it's been really fun, and then other artists that we work on with music as well. So I guess the last of the record label launch that, as of right now, there is more to come, which I'm excited about. But we did launch Soph through the Brightside Productions LLC record label as an independent artist. So she did release her first humming version of Forgive Me, and we worked on the instrumental for Forgive Me as well. And we did a sped up version, and then we're working on the music video for Forgive Me and the actual record Forgive Me as well. So yeah, that's pretty much the in terms of Brightside leadership, in terms of creativity, and there's other aspects to it. We apply evidence-based research into it, so there's a research aspect to it. We're trying to work on a newsletter called the Brightside Exchange. Um, more details later. I don't want to give away too much, but that's something that's in the works. Outside of the Brightside Productions, I do have a graduate advisor role with GHCP, which is a global health collaboration project that we work together on. We basically like built it together, but mostly you. So that's been growing so much throughout the years, and I just run the little mental health portion of it and guide the co-managers that came after me.
That's awesome. So, we just talked a lot about leadership and you have numerous leader positions. What do you think your leadership philosophy and style really are for all of these roles?
So I definitely feel like I rely on each person's like individual talents and work in a multidisciplinary like approach. So I like to provide direction, but stay open to adapting the suggested plan. So like just try to provide some structure, and if it doesn't work out for everyone, adapt as we like try to like implement. But
Sure.
um I really like to emphasize collaboration because it really does take a team to make it all come to life.
Mhm.
There are ways to also like provide expertise without micromanaging and without like diminishing other people's ideas. I definitely like to encourage team members to share ideas because it's a great way to not have like what ifs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you seem to be a very successful person. You have a number of degrees, a number of leadership roles, and, a successful relationship. What would you say your keys to success are?
Hmm. I whenever you talk about me, I feel like wow, I've really done it. But every day I'm just grinding. But thank you so much. I appreciate it. So keys to
Yes.
success. I think the keys to success include being able to overcome failure. Like failure will always be a part of the process because you could always try to plan and make that 5-year plan, but often not everything goes as planned. So adaptability, perseverance, resilience, those are like the keys that I resort to succeed. It's very important to always seek growth. So growth is like everlasting, and the moment you decide you are done growing or done trying, that's when like the success disappears because the potential of opportunities are now limited within that the confines that you have established in your mind or your perceived barriers.
Yeah, that makes sense. In regards to perseverance and resilience, what are some challenges that you've faced in the past as a leader?
So there were many challenges and there were many lessons. So a struggle I definitely faced prior as a leader is setting too high of expectations too quickly. So I didn't, there's this model that has been drilled into my head, the SMART model.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely applying that. So I definitely want to not set too high of expectations and make more realistic things. So it's a specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So that's something that I apply now. And, going back to adaptability, that has been ingrained now into me because, you set the expectation and you set the pressure that it has to come out a certain day or you have to finish a specific project by a certain time and it doesn't work out. And you have that sense of like, oh, you failed, you didn't meet these expectations, but those expectations are only set by yourself. So um
Yeah.
that adjustability has really like helped me, and learning from that like learning from those failures and those hardships has only like improved me as a leader. I also think that it's important to not feel like you have to rush something
Mm,
and are only focused on like the destination, then it sort of like forsakes the journey. So now
mm,
I'm more focused on the present, yet still looking forward to what's to come, and also focused on managing stress has also been a really like important thing for me to grow. I learned that stress is equal to rumination times pressure.
mhm.
So in moments of stress, I remind myself that of that formula and try to reduce it either through the rumination, like by reducing that, or reducing some of that pressure.
Yeah, I think that's all very insightful. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm sure that'll, help a lot of people that are dealing with some of the same stuff that you've dealt with in the past. I think there's a lot of people that are interested in becoming a leader or, starting their own project. So let's talk about that a little bit. What are some of the costs of assuming a leadership role?
So if you are definitely trying to build your own company, so have a startup company, I definitely have had to put a lot of like personal funds to make it happen. And it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years to make a business profitable. So forgetting that about the journey and not having a strong financial plan can certainly impact the business morale or the operations. So it's very important to not like compare yourself, to not let the competition overwhelm you. And it's really, really hard to do, but it's something that you just have to like really try to like embrace, because if they're ahead financially and have more resources, then that pressure only like cripples you and you're so focused on others instead of just focusing on, your own art and your own expression and growth. Um so essentially what matters is, to do what's best for oneself and to persevere, to focus on that.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's definitely helpful. You know, for people who are weighing this option, we kind of heard a little bit about the cost. What do you think are some of the benefits of, starting a leadership role?
So definitely, working with other people, you get to know them. Each person really provides their own set of expertise or lessons or life experiences. So especially by working through a multidisciplinary team, I get to learn from multiple disciplines, and and leading like them, because
Mhm.
they're from different fields, I have to rely on their expertise and just work as a actual system and work together to bring it all together. So it's definitely active listening, and you gain skills and you know how to read people better. Um, so when you engage in active listening and you know what the people are actually trying to communicate with you, you're able to have a direct um approach to resolve things. And if that doesn't work, because you're so good at active listening, you're able to adjust. So I've definitely gained a lot of skills. I've definitely gained a lot of knowledge. Uh,
Yeah.
a lot of networking as well is very beneficial.
Mhm. So, what advice would you offer to other people who are seeking to develop their leadership potential?
Uh, so that's a really good question, because not many people know where to start, but I would just try to get into any organization that isn't necessarily a paid position, because often volunteering is the best way to show off one's skills, gain new skills, and to be also um, exposed to the networking and of working professionals of like one's interest. And even if you are exposed to that and you end up finding out that that isn't for you, like that's also good. You're narrowing down your options and you're like exposing yourself to different fields. So I think it's like, if you have to consider your network, you are the average of the 5 people you know. So exposing yourself to all sorts of people, you get to gain certain skills that are valuable to you and embrace that into your own living. So I've definitely have had a lot of exposure in different fields, and working in those fields has given me clarity into what I want to do in my life.
All right, so for our next segment, Bright Talk, we're going to discuss some complicated topics in hopes of shining light on the matter. So this week we're going to be discussing the reduction of rights and how to combat it. And that's going to be with Mr. Richard Brito, who we've been talking with. So, we'll go ahead and get right into it. There's a few different things that have been going on. Richard, where would you like to start since you're kind of the expert leading us here?
So I definitely think we should start with affirmative action.
Okay. Okay. I like that. So I guess just, for viewers or for myself that don't really understand affirmative action and, what that might mean, could you just tell us a little bit about what that actually is?
Oh yeah, for sure. So affirmative action is essentially, was recently removed. And that means that policies or practices that favor groups that tend to suffer from discrimination, especially in relation to employment or education, are no longer in place. So this could lead to a sharp decline in workplace diversity.
Okay, so I think we hear about all of these different changes and we kind of almost get desensitized to them. But a lot of people, care about this and, want to help fix the situation. So what can we do? What can be done?
So there's definitely a lot that can be done. Advocacy for one. So we want to advocate for the reinstatement of such policies so that affirmative action can be reinstated. Additionally, organizations can voluntarily implement diversity and inclusion initiatives. So just because affirmative action was struck down does not mean that institutes, like for instance, private institutions that aren't under government, no longer have to, oblige to diversity inclusion. So you have the power to advocate and to tell universities to retain diversity because it is essential for equal opportunity, and that's the whole point of this country.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we talk about minority populations, we have to factor in intersectionality and, kind of bring that to light as well. With that being said, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the laws that have been passed that have affected the LGBTQ plus population. So the first one I wanted to kind of go over was the recent drag ban and just kind of what does that mean and what can we do about that?
Yeah, so there have been some drag bans going across the nation. So a drag ban refers to laws that restrict or prohibit drag performances. So these laws have been passed in some states, often under the guise of religious freedom restoration acts, and are seen as discriminatory towards the LGBTQIA plus community.
So what can we do here?
So there are legal challenges, and they have mounted against these laws. Advocacy and public awareness campaigns could also be effective in opposing such legislations because you do have the right to assemble. You do have the right to express yourself. So there have been a mounting of legal cases trying to dismantle these laws.
So, the next one that I think of, and that's been, a topic of discussion in my workplace, which is in healthcare, is the removal of trans affirming care. So, do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, and then I would definitely like to hear some of your experiences if possible. So, trans affirming care, that has been challenged recently for the removal of. So that essentially refers to the prohibition or restriction of medical treatments and procedures that affirms a transgender person's gender identity. So that includes hormone replacement therapy and gender affirming surgeries.
Yeah, so that's been a big topic here. I'm living in Georgia, so we also recently had laws that were changing what we're able to offer, specifically in the trans youth population. So it's been difficult because we look at, I think one of the things people are concerned about, which maybe comes from a good place, is that, will people regret this care when they get it, when they're children? And when we actually look at the statistics and we look at suicide, rates in the trans population, we see that, depression and suicide rates are really high in people that aren't able to get the care that they need, to express how they identify. So I think, through studies, we've really shown that giving this care decreases depression, and
Yep, absolutely.
very few people regret it. And, we think about all of the things that we can do, like getting tattoos or things that are much less meaningful. And the rates of, regretting those decisions are much, much, much higher. So, that's just something we've been talking about in healthcare, and hopefully we can kind of circumvent that somehow, and, through legal changes.
Yeah,
So I
great
guess
points.
moving forward, what do you think we could do about that?
Yeah, so advocacy for sure, because rights of transgender individuals to access necessary medical care is very crucial. So legal challenges could also be mounted against these prohibitive laws. And it's very important that we spread awareness on these topics, because if we gather together and tackle these problems together, united as one, we could certainly make this world a better place. We just have to definitely increase advocacy.
So, we can't really talk about all of these topics without talking about the overturn of Roe v. Wade. And I know most people are probably familiar in general, but, just in case, do you mind kind of going through that as well with us?
Yes. So in 1973, there was a case known as Roe v. Wade, and the Supreme Court sided, which gave the constitutional right to privacy and for a woman to have the right to the decision to have an abortion. So by overturning the Roe v. Wade case that occurred in the Supreme Court, it now means that states now have the ability to ban or restrict access to abortion services. So this decision affects millions of women in the US who will lose the constitutional right to abortion. And thereafter, people can now come after the right to privacy, because that case was gave people the federal right to privacy.
Hmm. That's a good point as well, and one that, most people don't think about or don't know about. Um, so I guess one other thing for Roe v. Wade is, you know, this distinction as well between some of the states who won't even allow abortions in, medically necessary situations. And I think there's a lot of people and probably a lot of listeners that, might be pro-life, with good intentions. And I think just remembering that these laws are also, affecting the lives of these women. And so when we're, saying pro-life, are we pro everyone's life? And I think that's just something to, take into consideration here.
Yeah, for sure. And especially with the fact that not every situation is the same. Every circumstance has its own set of like unique characteristics. So the parents should have a decision. The mother ultimately carrying the child within her should have that decision. And there are abortion bans occurring like as strict as 6 weeks, and
Mhm.
that comes way too close to the menstrual cycle for some women who have irregular menstrual cycles. That could, create a lot of fear, phobia, anxiety. So there's just a lot of um, advocacy that's needed, which what could be done. So advocacy for reproductive rights and access to safe and legal abortion services is very, very important. We have to have legal challenges be mounted against restrictive abortion laws, because essentially it's government imposition into the micro lives of like all of us. And it's like the government saying you have to have this child, and force this perpetuated generational trauma or uh poverty, because the person might not be able to provide for this child. So it's like they're being forced to have this child. And if they went past the 6 week mark, for instance, like let's say that it was a rape case, um, which is very dark, but and sometimes it takes time for the victim to come forward, or get into that survivor mentality.
Mhm.
And if it takes them a little bit over a month, let's say 6 weeks, and they're right into 7 weeks. They come forward and they realize that they're pregnant. They can't have that abortion, and they have to live with that um,
Yeah,
trauma forced. But each case is unique, so we can't really force generalized legislature into everyone. We have to see the implications that it has.
right. And notably it can take a lot of time to schedule an abortion, and we have certain things that you have to kind of hoops you have to go through, for lack of a better word, for people who are pursuing an abortion. And so, even if you just missed your period and you take a pregnancy test, you might not be able to set it up by the time that 6 weeks passes.
Great point. Wow, that's an amazing point too that I didn't even think about, especially since you work in that field and you could like really resonate and understand their circumstances.
No, thank you. So, one of the things that I didn't unfortunately don't know a lot about, and I'd like to learn more about, is the overturning of protection from discrimination for LGBTQIA plus individuals in private business. So I really haven't heard too much about this one, unfortunately. Do you mind kind of educating me on that?
Yeah, no problem. So this refers to laws that allow private businesses to now refuse services to LGBTQIA plus customers under the guise of religious freedom.
Mm,
So these laws are seen as discriminatory and a violation of the civil rights.
yeah, that's awful. So what can we do about this one specifically?
Again, legal challenges should be mounted against these discriminatory laws. So like public awareness campaigns, advocacy for LGBTQIA plus rights can also help oppose such legislation. We have to like really unite because, mentioning how public sector is imposing these laws upon us, and now we have the private sector and they're allowing this free realm of discrimination in the private sector. No, that shouldn't be allowed.
Right. Okay. And then, I guess the last thing that I wanted to go through today, and I appreciate you answering all of these questions and kind of going through all of these different elements with us. The last thing I wanted to talk about, which I know is probably might be relevant to you, is certainly relevant to me, is the Supreme Court denying the student loan forgiveness, decision that was going on this year. Could you tell us more about that?
So yes, the Supreme Court's decision means that President Biden's proposal to forgive about $10,000 per borrower in student debt has been struck down. So this decision affects more than 40 million Americans who stood and benefit from the plan.
Hmm. So what can we do? How do we get this forgiveness to be placed back?
So advocacy for student loan reform is crucial, especially with the fact that if you have interest occurring and you don't have a really good salary, it's like you're constantly just paying for interest and the debt never really goes away. So it's a way to like keep people captured in that incurring debt. So it's very important to hold legislators and people that we're electing into the administration accountable. So the Biden administration has pledged to find other means to help people ease their student loan burdens using other existing laws. So additionally, existing debt cancellation programs could provide some relief for borrowers. So I know that there is a plan being launched by the administration to have a repayment plan more affordable from borrowers that received loans. So it's very important to keep putting pressure on the people that we elect because they're working for us. They're here to serve us and make sure that our rights and our livelihood is better. That's the whole point of running for Congress or running for presidency. You're working for the American people. You're working for your country. So definitely keeping them accountable.
That's a good point. And I know it doesn't always feel like that, but that is the truth. So it's a good reminder. Well, thank you so much for all of this information. And I really appreciate you kind of going through all of this and spending your time talking to us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited I get to interview you next week.
Looking forward to it.
All right, see you then.